What if consciousness is not happening inside your brain, but your brain is happening inside consciousness? What if everything you've been taught about reality has the relationship completely reversed? The deeper scientists look into the foundations of existence, the stranger the universe becomes. Matter behaves like possibility. Observation changes outcomes, and the line between the observer and the observed begins to blur. Tonight, we're exploring one of the most fascinating questions ever asked. Is consciousness merely a product of reality, or is it the hidden force that gives reality its shape? Stay with me, because by the end of this journey, you may never look at yourself or the universe the same way again. If you're enjoying this exploration of quantum consciousness, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more mind-expanding content on consciousness, reality, and the mysteries of existence. And most importantly, leave a comment below. Do you believe that's strange reality, or does reality create consciousness? Also, tell us which country, city, or region of the world you're watching from. I'm curious to see how far this message is traveling across the earth and which corner of the world is receiving it right now. Right now, as you listen to these words, there is a silent assumption operating in the background of your mind. It is an assumption so deeply embedded in human perception that most people never stop to question it. You assume that reality exists exactly as you see it. You assume that the world is already there, fully formed, waiting for you to observe it. You assume that consciousness is something happening inside your brain while the universe unfolds independently outside of you. This seems obvious. It seems rational. It seems beyond debate. Yet some of the most profound discoveries in science, philosophy, and human experience suggest that this assumption may be incomplete. The possibility we are about to explore is not merely that consciousness observes reality, but that consciousness participates in reality in ways far deeper than most people realize. For centuries, humanity viewed the universe as a giant machine. Everything appeared to operate according to fixed laws. Objects moved through space. Causes produced effects. Matter existed independently of observation. The universe seemed cold, mechanical, and detached from human awareness. In this model, consciousness was little more than a byproduct of biological processes. Your thoughts, emotions, dreams, and perceptions were considered secondary phenomena generated by the brain. Reality came first, awareness came second. Then something unexpected happened. Scientists began looking deeper into the structure of matter itself. They examined the smallest components of reality and discovered a world that behaved nothing like common sense predicted. The deeper they looked, the stranger things became. Objects that should have behaved like tiny particles behaved like waves. Matter appeared to exist in multiple possibilities simultaneously. Events that seemed impossible according to classical logic began appearing repeatedly in experiments. The universe beneath the surface did not resemble a machine at all. It resembled something fluid and deeply interconnected. One of the most famous examples emerged from what became known as the double-slit experiment. At first glance, the experiment appears simple. Particles are fired toward a barrier containing two openings. Common sense predicts that particles should pass through one opening or the other. Yet when scientists performed the experiment, the results suggested something astonishing. The particles behaved as though they passed through both openings simultaneously, creating interference patterns normally associated with waves rather than solid objects. But the real mystery appeared when observation entered the picture. When researchers attempted to measure which opening the particle traveled through, the behavior changed. The interference pattern disappeared. The particle behaved differently when observation occurred. The act of measurement altered the outcome. This discovery became one of the most discussed and misunderstood findings in modern science. It does not prove that human thoughts magically create reality. It does not demonstrate that consciousness controls the universe in a simplistic sense. However, it raises a profound question. What exactly is the relationship between observation and existence? For many people, this question remains confined to laboratories and scientific journals. Yet its implications reach directly into everyday experience. Every moment of your life is filtered through awareness. Every sight, sound, memory, emotion, and belief appears within consciousness. You have never experienced anything outside awareness itself. Everything you know about reality arrives through perception. Pause for a moment and consider this carefully. You have seen mountains, oceans, cities, stars, and countless other objects. You have experienced relationships, achievements, disappointments, fears, and hopes. But every one of those experiences appeared within the field of awareness. Without awareness, there is no experience of reality whatsoever. Consciousness is not simply one object among many. It is the stage upon which all objects appear. This realization forms the foundation of many ancient wisdom traditions. Long before modern physics emerged, philosophers and mystics explored the nature of awareness through direct observation. Rather than studying external matter, they investigated consciousness itself. Across cultures separated by geography and centuries, remarkably similar conclusions began to appear. They suggested that the sense of separation between observer and observed may be partially illusory. They proposed that reality is not composed of isolated fragments, but of interconnected processes unfolding within a larger whole. The language varied. The symbols differed, yet the underlying insight remained surprisingly consistent. What if awareness is more fundamental than we assume? Most people spend their lives focused entirely on the contents of consciousness. They focus on thoughts. They focus on emotions. They focus on goals, fears, plans, and memories. Rarely do they examine the awareness within which all those experiences arise. It is similar to watching a movie while never noticing the screen. The images become so captivating that the background supporting them disappears from attention. Quantum consciousness theories emerge precisely at this intersection between physics and awareness. Although there is no universally accepted scientific theory proving that consciousness creates reality, many researchers continue exploring whether consciousness plays a deeper role in the structure of existence than traditional materialism allows. The debate remains active. The questions remain unresolved. Yet the very existence of the discussion reveals something important. Our understanding of reality is far from complete. What makes this topic so fascinating is not merely the science. It is the personal relevance. Every human being lives inside an ongoing relationship between perception and reality. Whether consciousness directly influences physical events or not, perception unquestionably shapes experience. Two people can encounter the same situation and emerge with entirely different realities. One sees opportunity, another sees danger. One finds meaning, another finds chaos. The external circumstances may remain identical, yet the lived experience differs dramatically. This observation leads us toward a crucial insight. The reality you experience is never simply reality itself. It is reality interpreted through consciousness. Your beliefs influence attention. Your attention influences perception. Your perception influences decisions. Your decisions influence outcomes. This feedback loop operates continuously. Most people remain unaware of its power because it functions automatically. Yet once you begin observing the process, you realize that consciousness is not a passive spectator. It is an active participant in experience. Consider how often your emotional state changes the world around you. A stressful day can make neutral events appear threatening. A joyful day can make ordinary moments feel extraordinary. The environment remains largely unchanged, yet the quality of reality transforms. What changed was not the world. What changed was awareness. This does not mean reality is imaginary. It means reality is always experienced through a lens. Modern neuroscience supports this understanding. The brain does not merely record objectively like a camera. Instead, it constructs models based on incoming information. It predicts, filters, organizes, and interprets data continuously. Much of what you perceive is not direct reality, but a reconstruction generated by the nervous system. In a very real sense, your experience of the world is a living simulation created from sensory information and internal expectations. Now imagine the implications. If perception is an active perception process rather than passive reception, then consciousness occupies a far more significant role than most people realize. Awareness becomes not merely a witness, but an essential component of experience itself. This realization can feel unsettling at first. It challenges deeply rooted assumptions about certainty and objectivity. Yet it also opens extraordinary possibilities. If consciousness shapes experience, then understanding consciousness becomes one of the most important pursuits imaginable. Many people spend years searching for meaning in external achievements. They seek fulfillment through possessions, status, recognition, or control. Yet no external accomplishment can answer the deeper question of who or what is experiencing life. The search eventually turns inward. Not because the external world lacks value, but because awareness itself remains the one constant presence throughout every changing circumstance. Everything else changes. Your body changes, your relationships change, your beliefs change, your environment changes. Entire civilizations rise and fall, yet awareness remains present through every experience. This simple observation has profound implications. It suggests that consciousness may not merely be another phenomenon within reality. It may be the very condition that makes experience possible. As we continue this journey into quantum consciousness, it is important to maintain intellectual honesty. There are many exaggerated claims surrounding these subjects. Some people misuse quantum terminology to justify ideas unsupported by evidence. Others dismiss the entire conversation because of those exaggerations. Both extremes miss the deeper opportunity. The true value of quantum consciousness lies not in certainty, but in inquiry. It invites us to ask better questions. What is awareness? Why does subjective experience exist? How does observation relate to reality? What role does perception play in shaping experience? Can consciousness be reduced entirely to physical processes? Or does it reveal something deeper about existence itself? These questions remain among the greatest mysteries humanity has ever encountered. And perhaps that mystery is precisely the point. The universe may not be asking us to memorize answers. It may be inviting us to investigate the nature of observation itself, to look beyond assumptions, to examine the observer behind every thought, emotion, and perception, to discover whether the boundary between mind and reality is as solid as we have been taught to believe. Because the moment you begin questioning the nature of awareness, something remarkable happens. You stop looking at consciousness as a small event occurring inside the universe, and you begin wondering whether the universe, as you know it, is appearing within consciousness itself. That possibility changes everything. If consciousness is more than a byproduct of the brain, then the next question becomes unavoidable. Where does consciousness actually exist? Most people assume awareness is trapped inside the skull, generated by billions of neurons firing in complex patterns. This explanation appears reasonable because changes in the brain clearly affect perception, memory, and behavior. Damage a specific area of the brain and certain abilities disappear. Alter brain chemistry and subjective experience changes. At first glance, this seems to settle the debate. Consciousness must be produced by the brain. But what if the brain is not creating consciousness in the way we assume? What if it is doing something else entirely? Imagine a radio. When music emerges from a radio speaker, it is easy to assume the device itself creates the music. Yet the radio is not generating the broadcast. It is receiving, decoding, and translating information that already exists within a larger field. Damage the radio and the music becomes distorted. Destroy it completely and the music disappears from that particular device. However, the signal itself continues to exist. This analogy has fascinated philosophers, neuroscientists, and consciousness researchers for decades, because it opens a radically different possibility. What if the brain is not the source of awareness, but the interface through which awareness experiences reality? Whether this idea ultimately proves correct remains uncertain, but it introduces a profound shift in perspective. Instead of viewing consciousness as something trapped inside matter, consciousness becomes something interacting with matter. The implications are enormous. Throughout history, countless traditions have described reality as a unified field of intelligence. Different cultures used different names. Some called it spirit. Others called it source, universal mind, cosmic consciousness, or the fabric of existence itself. Modern language often dismisses these descriptions as mythology. Yet many of these traditions arrived at remarkably similar conclusions despite being separated by oceans, centuries, and completely different worldviews. They all pointed toward interconnectedness. not interconnectedness as a poetic metaphor, but as a fundamental property of reality. Today, modern physics has uncovered phenomena that challenge our ordinary understanding of separation. At the quantum level, particles can become linked in ways that seem to transcend classical notions of distance. Systems behave less like isolated objects and more like relationships within a larger network. While these discoveries do not prove spiritual claims, they do challenge simplistic assumptions about independent existence. The universe increasingly appears less like a collection of separate things and more like an intricate web of interactions. Now consider your own experience. Every thought you have influences your emotional state. Every emotion influences your perception. Every perception influences your actions. Every action influences the environment around you. The boundary between inner and outer experience becomes much less clear than it first appears. Most people spend their lives attempting to control external circumstances while paying very little attention to the internal processes through which those circumstances are experienced. Yet the quality of life depends heavily on perception. Two individuals can possess identical resources and live in completely different psychological realities. One feels trapped. The other feels empowered. One experiences abundance. The other experiences lack. The difference often emerges not from the environment itself, but from the relationship consciousness has with that environment. This realization becomes even more significant when we examine attention. Attention is one of the most powerful forces in human experience. Whatever receives sustained attention gains influence within awareness. Whatever is repeatedly ignored gradually fades from perception. Entire realities can emerge or disappear based on where attention is directed. Think about how many things exist around you right now that you are not consciously noticing. Sounds in the background, sensations in your body, details in your environment. They were present the entire time, yet they remained invisible until attention illuminated them. This simple fact reveals something extraordinary. Your experience of reality is not determined solely by what exists. It is determined by what enters awareness. This is where the concept of the quantum observer becomes psychologically meaningful. Regardless of the precise mechanics involved, observation changes experience. The act of noticing alters the structure of awareness. What was unconscious becomes conscious. What was hidden becomes visible. What was ignored becomes significant. In this sense, every human being is continuously shaping reality through attention. Not necessarily by controlling physical events, but by selecting which aspects of existence become psychologically real. Most people underestimate the consequences of this process. A person focused on fear begins discovering evidence that reinforces fear. A person focused on opportunity begins discovering possibilities that reinforce opportunity. A person focused on resentment notices reasons to remain resentful. A person focused on gratitude notices reasons to remain grateful. Reality becomes a mirror reflecting the dominant patterns of attention. This does not mean external circumstances are irrelevant. Genuine challenges exist, pain exists, loss exists, uncertainty exists. Yet consciousness determines how these experiences are interpreted, integrated, and transformed. The ancient wisdom traditions understood this principle deeply. They taught that liberation does not come from controlling every external event. It comes from mastering awareness itself. When attention becomes conscious rather than automatic, the individual gains a new relationship with reality. Instead of being pulled endlessly by thoughts, one begins observing thoughts. Instead of being consumed by emotions, one begins witnessing emotions. Instead of identifying completely with mental activity, one begins recognizing the awareness within which mental activity occurs. At first, this distinction seems subtle. Eventually, it becomes life-changing. Because once you discover that awareness exists prior to thought, you realize that your identity may be far larger than the narratives running through your mind. Thoughts come and go. Emotions come and go. Beliefs come and go. Experiences come and go. Yet awareness remains. The more clearly this becomes understood, the more the illusion of separation begins to weaken. You start recognizing that consciousness is not merely observing life from a distance. It is participating in an ongoing relationship with existence itself. And perhaps this is why so many people describe moments of profound clarity as transformative. In those rare moments, the constant mental noise quiets. The division between observer and observed softens. Life appears vivid, immediate, and interconnected. Not because reality changed, but because perception changed. The field was always there. The connection was always there. The awareness was always there. The only difference is that for a brief moment, you noticed. And that may be one of the greatest secrets, hidden within the mystery of quantum consciousness. The search is not about acquiring something new. It is about recognizing what has been present from the very beginning. Because the deeper you investigate awareness, the more difficult it becomes to treat consciousness as an accidental side effect of matter. Instead, consciousness begins to look like one of the central mysteries of existence itself. And perhaps the ultimate question is not whether consciousness exists inside the universe. Perhaps the question is whether the universe appears inside consciousness. Before we continue into the next chapter, I want to ask you something. Where in the world are you receiving this message right now? Which country, city, region, or corner of the earth are you watching from? Leave a comment below and share where this message has reached you. It is fascinating to think that people separated by thousands of miles, different cultures, and different lives are all meeting here in the same field of ideas, at the same moment, exploring the same mystery together.